politicians trek back to Canberra this week for the first sitting of Parliament. With an election looming, it's expected to be a heated year in the chamber.
The inside word, we're joined by Assistant Treasurer Kelly O'Dwyer from Melbourne and Deputy Labor Leader Tanya Plibersek. Good morning to you both. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
First to you, Kelly. Now, some of the papers saying Malcolm Turnbull is failing to make decisions, being a bit of a ditherer. I think one of the papers said it was the Abbott government with a better salesman. What's your response to that?
Well, I would say this, that it's very important that we understand that our prosperity as a country is not predestined, and we need to consider things very, very carefully before we make any change. And we're doing that with our taxation policy. We're kicking the tyres on a whole range of options. We know that we've had a lot of suggestions by state premiers, including Labor premiers, who want to see the GST increase, but we're not going to take action without understanding exactly what it involves. We want to lower the overall tax base, and so we're making sure we kick the tyres before we take it to the Australian people for them to decide.
Tanya, it was one of the things after Mr Turnbull ascended to the top job. People were saying, well, yeah, we're kind of tired of our politicians being governed by the 24-hour news cycle. They should perhaps take their time to consider the big issues.
Well, taking time is one thing, but Malcolm Turnbull's had 6 months now, and he said at the beginning that what Australia needed was decisive economic leadership, and essentially we've seen no real change from the Abbott government. We've still got the $80 billion of cuts to health and education. Yes, we're talking about a GST, but we're just talking about it. There's no indication of when this will happen, what the rate will be, whether it'll be applied to health and education, how the money that's raised will be spent, whether it'll be actually returned to the states to do something about the health and education systems that we're so concerned about. So we hear a lot of blah, blah, blah from Malcolm Turnbull, but not much real action.
It'll all be revealed in the May budget, apparently. Tanya, we just want to move on to another issue. Of course, this week the High Court found that offshore detention is lawful. They left the question of ethics aside, but they said it's lawful. You described Australia's asylum seeker debate as toxic. Now, given that Labor pretty much has supported the current detention and processing regime, you know, what are the toxic elements as you see them? What criticisms do you have of the government position?
Well, I think we've got a lot of debate at either end of the spectrum here. And the truth is that offshore processing is part of the government policy and part of our policy, because we want to see the end of people getting on boats, deaths at sea. But we also believe, Labor believes, that people should be treated decently and humanely. There's no reason that processing times should have doubled under this government. The secrecy that's attached to Manus Island and Nauru, the fact that organisations like Save the Children that actually raise issues about the welfare of children on the island get sacked from their contracts, the fact that there's no transparency, no accountability. We believe that there should be an independent children's advocate. We believe that these centres should be governed in a way that is transparent and accountable, where people are treated decently, where they have the services that they need, healthcare, education, concern for the welfare of children, including their psychological welfare. I mean, there is different ways of doing this, a way that continues to send a message that people shouldn't risk their lives getting on a boat, but doesn't treat them as cruelly and as secretively as is currently the case.
Kelly, fair criticism?
Well, I don't think it's fair criticism at all, and I think if you were to listen to Tanya just then, you would think that people are not treated in a humane and compassionate way, and that's simply not the case at all. In fact, under the previous Labor government, we saw children who were in detention, in fact a record number of children who were in detention. More than 8,000, of course, came unauthorised by boat. At the very height of children in detention, it was under the Gillard government, just under 2,000 children, I think, in detention at that particular time, coming off a base of the previous Howard government where there were no children in detention.
Yeah, but if we're talking about the manner in which they're detained, Kelly, you know, there's so many people have come out in recent times who've been there and said that the conditions are inhumane. The only journalist that's been allowed in so far is one of the government cheerleaders on this issue. I mean, how can we take the government's word for this?
It's also the length of time, Andrew.
It's important to understand Andrew, as well, that for the first time we have given children continuous education. This was something that was happening only very spasmodically under the previous Labor government. We have been very, very keen to ensure that we do care for the psychological welfare of these children. We do know it's very, very stressful and that these families are under, you know, enormous stresses. But we also know that there are a whole host of other families sitting in refugee camps who are not able to pay people smugglers who also want to have a good life in Australia.
Well,
and we want to be
is
able to make sure that those people can come to this country as well.
Sure.
Andrew, one of the problems is that there is literally nowhere for these people to go now because the government has failed to make any arrangements with other countries about resettlement. They had a deal with Cambodia. They ended up spending $55 million to resettle 3 people. That's why the processing times have doubled, because they have absolutely failed to make any arrangement with any other country to resettle refugees.
It's not. Look, I have to respectfully say, Tanya, that's not true. I mean, we are looking very carefully at all of the applications that come forward. We need to consider the security issues that are involved with the applications. We need to consider. We need to consider the backgrounds and the bona fides of the situations that people say that they have come from, and we need to ensure that we consider their cases very, very carefully before making a decision.
Did you spend
I don't think that's the wrong thing to do. I think that's the right thing to do.
Kick a few more tyres by the sound of it.
Yeah.
Listen, Kelly and Tanya, we have to leave it there, unfortunately. No doubt we will continue this debate over the coming months before the election. Plenty more to cover as well, including
Andrew,
what we do with extra GST.
Thanks for raising awareness about ovarian cancer. It's great that the show's doing that. It's a secret killer because it's very late to diagnose. It's wonderful that you're raising the issue.
And I agree. I'm a patron for it, and it is fantastic because it is such a deadly disease.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Kelly, and thanks, Tanya, for joining us.